Hi, Spring fans. Welcome to another installment of Spring Tips. In this installment, we're going to take a look at uh, Java. We're not going to look at any one particular feature of Spring, but instead, I just want to pull back the covers and kind of look at the new version of Java, Java 14, which is really impressive. Cumulatively, the last several years have seen a number of releases, which, if you haven't encountered them and all the features that they bring, might be fairly well astonishing. I couldn't believe writing some code as I was yesterday with the new release what this looks like. And I had to step back and say, oh, hey, this is really nice. This is actually a very different language than even Java 8. And that was, of course, a very different language than Java 7, just as Java 5 was a very different language than Java 1.4. We have come a long way since Java 5. And I wanted to show off some of those features. And right now, we're at a perfect time where you can now get access to IDEs that now support the languages. The build tools support them. The frameworks like Spring support them. And so we're going to take a look at them by using Spring Boot 2.3.0 M2 or later. So anything later will work just fine, of course. And we're just going to call this 14, all right? Now I'm going to choose Java 13. There's no 14 there yet, but as you'll see, it is possible to make that work. So we're going to go ahead and add that. I'm going to build an application that uses Postgres and the JDBC support, Spring Data JDBC, or just the Spring JDBC support. So we'll go ahead and build a very simple application. And I'm going to hit generate. And that'll give me a new directory, which I'll open up, a new project, CD downloads. I'm going to unzip this, and I'm going to open this with JetBrains IntelliJ EAP, right? So here it is, EAP 2020.1. This is a early access preview release. It's not the final one, but of course, by the time you watch this, it may very well be a very old, ancient legacy version by the time you're sort of confronting this issue. So who knows? Let's open this up. Hopefully it'll open up. Sometimes these EAPs are a little less than stable. Okay. Come on. Not today, huh? Okay, let's see. Seems like every other restart works just fine. Let me just do it one more time. Good stuff. Hey, look at that, huh? It worked. So now we're gonna open up our project. Okay. And here I'll do a Maven install. Add this as a Maven project. Okay. Okay, synchronizing. Now, in order for this to work, for this to be like just it works out of the box kind of a thing, I have to set up a few plugins, right? So I'm going to do plugin, and the first plugin we'll do is the compiler plugin. Okay, so artifact ID, Maven compiler plugin. I'm just overriding the default plugin that's provided out of the box, so I can use a number of different features here. I'm going to use release 14, of course. Oh, by the way, you have to specify Java 14 up here. By the time you watch this, maybe this Maven compiler stuff, this business I'm doing here, won't be required, but in the meantime, act as though it is, okay? We're going to enable the preview feature. So every release of Java these days has preview features that are sort of meant to test the waters for new features that will eventually be made part of the actual release. Well, in order to enjoy all this new stuff, you have to enable those arguments, those preview features, which is fine. It's a good problem to have. So we're going to say, yes, I want to enable the Java compiler. And what else do I want to do? I guess I want to do parameters equals true. So parameters equals true. This actually comes from the Maven BOM. I'm sorry, the Maven parent that comes in Spring Boot Starter Parent. They've already provided definitions for the Maven compiler plugin. To be honest with you, I don't know what this does, but I know it's set in the parent configuration for this plugin. And since I'm overriding it, I want to make sure to carry that forward. Okay, so artifact ID. We also have to configure the testing. So like that. We want configuration. Good. And then here it's a little differently. It's a little different. Instead of having compiler args and arg inside of it, you have a compiler line. And I'll just say enable preview. Okay. So that's it. That's now if you have a IntelliJ idea, 2020.1 later or later, and you have this configuration, you can just open up this project, and assuming you're running Java 14, and that's important, by the way. I use SDKman. If you do SDKman or SDK Manager, you can list all the different JDKs out there that you might want to install. You can see I've got a bunch of them installed. I've got 13, I've got different versions of 13, I've got an old 11, I've got old 8, right? Amazon. Sorry, Amazon. I don't have anything installed there, but you could. We've got Azul Zulu. We've got GraalVM's version, the Java.NET version. Java.NET is where I get the latest and greatest versions of Java 14. So you have to have installed that, and I've already done that, and I've also said SDK use space D space Java space and then the version name, and that makes it the default. So if I do Java version, you can see it's Java 14 and Java version. This is Java 14. Okay, so we have the current version of the toolchain. This is just telling the build about it. And I think we're ready to write some code, actually. Right? That's all you need. In the future, you probably won't need this, right? You can just say version equals 14 in the parent pom.xml, in the pom.xml at the top there, and it'll just work. But in the meantime, we've got what we need. So what we're going to do is build an application that reads and writes data from an SQL data store. So I've got Postgres running on my local machine here, and I'm going to ask for all the data from the people database. Okay, there we are. So delete from people. Good. Okay, now I'm going to build an application that it just works with JDBC, and it'll give us a chance to look at a lot of new features in Java 14 and so on. So I'm really impressed with this language. I'm a big Kotlin fan. I love Scala, I love Kotlin, I love Groovy, I love a lot of these more productive languages because they've always offered me a chance to do more. But here, with Java 14, I was like, wow, this is actually a really svelte, very useful little language, and gives me the ability to do interesting things. So I'm going to create a bean that's going to be loaded with the application when the application starts up. Okay, and in this code, I'll exercise the class we're going to build, which is a service. Okay, and our service is going to manage people. Okay, and the people is in this case I'm doing a kind of an anemic domain, right? And so normally if I had Lombok, I'd use @data @allargs constructor, @noargs constructor, and then I'd create a class person, that kind of thing, right? And then I'd actually start defining the fields. So I'd create a field, private integer ID, private string name, and all that just seems a little redundant. It's just like all I really care about is, hey, I've got a thing that's a struct basically that holds an integer called ID and a string called name, and everything else is immaterial. Well, now in Java 14, there's a feature called a record, and you might recognize this feature as case classes from Scala or data classes from Kotlin. And the way this works is you just create a constructor, and that's it. That's the class. When I use this class, let's actually try it out here. Let's say person P, new person. Here, I'm given a constructor, first of all. I can provide an ID and a name, okay? And if I want to access that information, I can just say .id, and I can say p.name, right? And you can see it's already got that. If I print it out, watch this, p, okay? So I've got this really nice, bean style thing, not a Java bean exactly, but it has everything I need, right? Let's run it and see what it gives us. Okay. Oh, I don't have a Postgres connection. Let me specify that. So Spring Data Source URL JDBC:postgres QL localhost orders. Okay. And then we want the username orders and the password orders. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so there you go. You can see when I printed out the record, it gave me a nice two-string. It has a working equals and hash code and all that stuff. And all I had to do was just to say this class. It even gave me a constructor, right? It has a constructor. Now, of course, I can provide my own constructor. I can provide a compact constructor. And here I can do things like, do assertions. I can say assert that, is true. ID is greater than 0, for example, right? The ID must be greater than 0. So you can do all sorts of validation there. You can even change the data, whatever. Maybe you want to say this dot name equals name dot to uppercase. So here, it's going to create a property. It's going to create a field for me called name. Here, I'm setting the value explicitly. I'm processing the constructor argument and setting it on the local object, right? And notice that there's no parentheses here. This is called a compact constructor, and it acts as though it's a constructor, but it lets me modify the syntax or the parameters from the constructor in the constructor like that. I can also do a traditional one, right, like this, in which case I'm just doing the work for this thing, right? You can do that if you want. I quite like the compact style if I use one at all, but in this case, I don't really need to, okay? So that's it. That's the entire object there. Now let's create the service, and our service is just going to be a Spring Bean that's going to work with JDBC. So we're going to use a JDBC template. We're going to create a constructor, okay? And in my constructor, I'm going to do some work. I'm going to actually, in my service, I'm going to do some work. I'm going to have a couple methods here. One that returns an object by its ID. So we'll say public person find by ID, integer ID, okay? And in order to make this work, I'm going to need some SQL, right? I'm going to create a SQL statement. So here I can use another nice feature in Java 14 and indeed Java 13, but that was a preview feature, right? Same here. So find by SQL, find by ID SQL equals, and I can use multi-line strings. How cool is this? So again, not controversial. If you've ever used any other language in the JVM, like Kotlin or Groovy or Scala, they've had multi-line strings for years. Ditto almost every other language out there. It's just really cool that it's finally here for us. So the people, right? That's the constructor, ID and name. So I'm going to say select all from people where ID equals question mark. That's my query, okay? So here I can say this dot template dot query for object, and I'll just do this dot find by SQL. I'll provide an object array, okay? And here I'm going to map the objects back into a type. In order to do that, I need a row mapper, and this is another feature. It's not new. It's not particular to Java 14. It's an old feature, but it's just kind of nice, right? I can actually create a person row mapper, and it's going to be a lambda. This is, again, if you're just using Java 7, this is going to seem like witchcraft, but it's just nice that we can do that. Okay, so we want rs.get int id, rs.get string name. All right, so that's a lambda. Okay, now that's it. That's one method. What about save? What about this? What about writing the data to the database? So public person create. I'm going to create an endpoint that will take a name, and I want to have something else. What if we have like an emotional state? Okay, like a status or emotions or current feels, right? So I want to have an enum for that current. Let's say emotional state. Okay, and let's just say sad, happy. Okay, so I want to be able to take one of those as well. So that's an enum, and I want to be able to turn that into a persisted record. So if you can see here, I've got an integer for that. It takes an index. It takes a value 0, 1, or -1, right? Let's say neutral. Let's say that. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to say, okay, let's decide what index to use, what ID to use for the emotional state. So emotional state index or whatever equals, and I could do, like this. I could say it's that, and then if emotional state, I can do comparisons basically. But this is very tedious, and also so is the int. Vars are nice. I like var. So wouldn't it be nice if I could branch through the different states here, right? And say, okay, if you're this, then you're that. If you're that, blah blah blah. Well, you can now. We have switch cases, which are expressions. So here I can say case sad, -1. Case happy, 1. Case neutral 0. Okay, and that's it. I'm actually assigning the result of the switch expression to the variable, and the variable is an int, right? But it's auto boxing for the win, so I'll do that. So now I've got my index, and I've got my data. Now I want to write some data to the database. Okay, so I need to create a SQL statement for that. So private final string insert SQL equals, look at that, I love that. The tools are cooperating, right? I'm using a modern version of IntelliJ, and I'm using a modern version of Java and a modern version of Spring Boot, and it's just making everything a little bit nicer. Actually, quite a bit nicer. And especially if you're still stuck on Java 7, this will seem like a different language to you. You might as well go from Java 7 to Kotlin or Scala at this point, because it is so different, but it's so nice. I gotta tell you, I'm just really pleased with what they've done and how they've integrated it. And by the way, as I'm typing all this stuff to you, consider that I'm showing you the stuff that I type. Not every release of Java has new syntax features, but every version of Java has new features. And some of those features are performance improvements or security improvements. I much prefer, I have a lot more fun with these performance improvements, but everybody needs security improvements, right? So I'm glad that they're there. I'm glad that they're working on these features all the time, because they make our runtimes faster and more svelte and more compact and more efficient and so on. And by the way, you can see the tool, the IDE, here, right? Like you can see there's a little gray line right where my cursor is, but above it in the text, there's a green line. It's telling me that if I were to print out this text right now, it would have a bunch of tabs at the beginning of each line. And actually it would print out it would print this out as a multi-line string, right? If I did this and then got rid of the extra space after that, suddenly now it's a multi-line, right? It's a multi-line, it's a string that's on multiple lines, but it's actually just one line, right? If I did that, now it's a string that's on one line with a large amount of space. It's basically, from here, you're going to see that much space between the closing parenthesis of people, name, comma, emotional state, and the beginning of values. So that there is actually like a left margin there, which I think is super cool. And for our purposes, it doesn't really matter, right? It's SQL, so take as much space as you want, I guess. But it's just nice that we can finally do this. No more concatenating strings together and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now insert SQL. We're going to use an input. We're going to do an insert, which in JDBC is not fun, but we'll get it done. So let's see. We are going to create a. We're going to call this .template .update. Okay, and we're going to use the insert SQL, and then in order to do that, though, we need to actually wrap it in an object that's going to create a prepared statement for us. And the reason we want to do this is because we have to create a prepared statement that will execute an update that will return a key that we can then use. So let's go back to here. Var PSCF equals new prepared statement creator factory. Okay, and then in the factory, we're going to use this .insert SQL. And we're going to provide some parameters. Okay, now these parameters we're gonna get from a list of parameters. This is another thing that's new since Java 8 is these nice collection literals, right? So here, this dot of, okay, and I can just, and there's others for sets and maps and whatever. But here I'm going to say I want to create a new SQL parameter of type var car, right? Is that right? Yeah, name. And I want to create it's going to be called name, and another SQL parameter of type integer. Okay, emotional state. Good. And so you can see that's actually a list. I can actually extract that out. It's a list of SQL parameters. Very convenient, right? We can see that, or just var it because it's more natural that way. Okay, so now we have this, and now we want to create a key holder, a generated key holder. So we're going to create a key holder. Key holder equals new generated key holder, and the key holder, we're going to, when we're done executing the statement, we're going to ask for the key. Okay, so here's how we do that. We pass all of this into the template. So this.template.update PSC. We need a PSCF, the factory. We're gonna actually go ahead and turn that into an executed call. So new prepared statement creator. I'm gonna pass in the actual parameter values themselves. So list of name and the emotional state, or status, I guess. State, there you go. Okay, pass that in. And then here we're gonna pass in the key holder. And then down here, we can get the data, we can extract it. Now I'm gonna get back a key. I'm gonna say key h.getKey. It's a number, right? So what I want to do, what I actually want to do is I want to say if key h instance of integer, right, which is what I'm hoping it is, then I can return, find by ID integer key h.getKey. Yikes! Look at all that redundant. I've had to confirm it's an integer, and then down here reaffirm or reconfirm that I want an integer. And that's annoying. So now in Java 14, just like in Kotlin and other languages, there are smart casts. So here I can say if it's an instance of an integer, give it a local instance name for the integer, so for the cast integer. And now I can remove that ridiculous boilerplate, right? So there you go. If that works, so it's saying in this block, it's already cast. I don't have to cast it again, if this is true. Otherwise, I want to throw an exception. Okay. Okay, so we couldn't create the person.class.getName. Okay. So this is my update. Oh, did I put the wrong index? I did. I didn't put the right one. Index. That's what it should be in there. Okay. It's the integer that we derive by looking at the different values in the enum. Okay. So now let's try it out. Let's see what we get. We've got our listener here. I'm going to inject my service, and down here, this.peopleservice.create Elizabeth, and we'll say emotional state sad. Okay, let's see if that works. Good. So there's that. I'm going to run the program. What did I do wrong? Let's see. It always pays to make sure you follow through. So, well, first of all, I didn't get the integer. I didn't define the integer for the record, did I? So, int emotional state. I forgot to do that. And that row mapper is no longer correct, so I have to say rs.get integer emotional state. Okay. Good. So there's this. Now, what else did I do wrong? I have my SQL statement. I've got the parameters. I've got the, oh, I have to set the, I have to configure the keys to return, don't I? So set return generated keys is true, right? It's true, like that. Okay. And then we've got generated key names, ID. So, whoops, we don't need that all. Okay. There we go. That's a little bit better. I knew I was forgetting something. That's not going to do what I want it to do otherwise. Cool. How cool is that, huh? So we wrote the record to the database. We were able to map it back into an object. It would get a nice toString. I didn't have to waste time with that. No extra annotations, no nothing, just straight Java. This is just a straight Java application. And yeah, It's a little bit of a forced example. I did JDBC. Maybe you would be using JPA or Spring Data JDBC. But we could see smart switch expressions. We could see nice things like the collection literals, right? The list.of and map.of and all that stuff. We've got to look at smart casting. We got to look at multi-line text strings. We got to look at records and their use. Where's my record? Up here, record, right? Um, we got to look at var, auto boxing or auto inference. I mean, or auto type inference, which I really love. That's not a thing that's new in 14, but all these things taken together, my friends, they make for a really interesting Java that I could not have imagined being able to write even 2 years ago, or especially not 6 years ago. Remember, Java's 25 years old now, but you couldn't do lambdas until 6 years ago, really, right? So for the very large majority of Java's lifetime, it was just not possible to write code like this. And the fact that I can write it now, it's awesome. I mean, Java is kind of an interesting language, I think. It's been around for a long time, and so it was innovative in the very beginning, and it's the foundation on which a lot of other languages have since patterned themselves. But it's been very successful in its minimalism, I think, and it's become the most ubiquitous language out there. And now it's okay for the language, now that it's prolific and successful, it's okay for it to start patterning itself off of other languages that have had smaller communities and were able to try out different things. And so this is, I think, a really interesting time to be using Java. The language already works. We know it works. People are happy, so we can add little syntax here and there to make things more friendly, right? To be more competitive, to be more accommodating. And so I just really like what the language team is doing. And like I said, there's a bunch of other features beyond syntax, but what I love, what I'm going to deal with day to day in my everyday life is syntax. And I'm just very happy to see that we're not disappointed on that front. This is by no means a reflection of all the amazing new features in the language. I've only begun to cover a few of them. I just think it's possible. It's just nice that we can actually do this kind of stuff today. So go ahead and get the bits. Try out the latest versions of Spring Boot, the latest version of Java 14, and the latest version of your favorite IDE that supports Java 14, and have fun. Thanks so much for watching, my friends, and as always, we'll see you next time.